Hello, Dale Little here with Rescue America Ministries in Chesnedea, Romania. I want to talk to you just a little bit about John chapter 3, verse 3, where Nicodemus, we're told, came to Jesus by night. And we'll look at maybe a little different aspect than what maybe you've heard before, looked at. And you notice in verse 3 it says that Jesus answered him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." And Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man be born when he's old?" And of course, Nicodemus didn't have a clue what Jesus was talking about. And then again, we see in verse 9, it says, Nicodemus said to him again, after Jesus had told him again he needed to be born again, he said, "How can these things be?" And Jesus answered him, "Are you the teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things?" So here, evidently, Nicodemus was a member of the Sanhedrin, and be a Jewish leader should have understood what Jesus was talking about here. But a lot of people, I know the first time, when I read that, and even after becoming a Christian, I looked at it and I thought, well, that is hard to understand. How would have Nicodemus, what's in the Old Testament, what's in the teachings that would have given him a hint that he had to be born again, and what that involved, how it was. So that's where we're going to go. Now, you can do a study on this, and you can find a lot of places that allude to this, and but I think what I have is very specific. And I think they're the major ones, and it's just going to look in a couple of the prophets, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And I think you'll see the answer is very plain. And Nicodemus should, yes, if he knew the Old Testament scriptures, should have known this. Unfortunately, a lot of people still don't understand this today. But let's go back to Jeremiah, and I'm in the English Standard Version. We'll go back to Jeremiah 17 and 9. And we'll see why we need to be born again. Of course, we're familiar with the scripture in the New Testament where it says all sin comes short of the glory of God. But like I say, Nicodemus didn't have that at the time, so what's back here in the Old Testament scriptures. And boy, this right here it is. The heart that we inherited from Adam is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Now, the King James says desperately wicked. There's different, and it says who can understand it. And there's lots of ways that could be interpreted, and I think all of them fit in this case. One place says that the heart is incurable. I mean, it's so sick, so wicked, it's incurable. There's no hope for it. And so we see that that's the reason that person needs to be born again, because the heart we were born with. And Paul, talks about a couple times in the New Testament, he says that we're a new creature, we're a new creation. And so that's what this is talking about here, and that's what is talking about being born again when Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again. So we look at that, and that gives a very evident reason. Now, to further look into that, if you go over to the very same prophet, Jeremiah, in chapter 24, verse 7, and I remember that by saying that'll preach 24/7. He says, "I will give them a heart to know that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return to me with their whole heart." Notice a couple things there. This is not talking about healing that old heart, doing heart surgery on it and patching it up or whatever, putting stents and all that stuff in it, and bypass surgery. No, it's talking about heart replacement. It's talking about transplant. And he said, "I will give them a heart to know that I am the Lord." That tells me that old wicked heart, Jeremiah 17:9, that he's talking about that we inherited from Adam, is not even capable of knowing Jesus Christ is Lord, knowing God is Lord. So he says, "I'll give them a heart to know that I'm the Lord." Well, boy, that says a lot right there. I had a terrible time when I first started writing a paper on this a few years back, and it took me 4 years before I'd ever publish it, put it out publicly, so to speak. Not that I've published it and got to have a big circulation of it or anything, but I talked about the study of the heart, and how we need a heart change, and that what bothered me was for years I'd hear people talk about, and they'd quote that verse, Jeremiah 17:9, and this goes way back, many, many years, probably 30 years ago. We would be here having prayer, and there's one fellow in church a little bit younger than me, and he talked about this other man in church, that very godly man, and he's a little older than me, but he'd often pray. He said, Lord, if I know my heart, then this is what I'm asking, this is what I'm praying for. This is what I want to see. And this younger fellow stands up in the prayer room one night and says, well, because he was giving a little talk that night and before we went up to worship, and he said, I hear this phrase, if I know my heart, if I know my heart. He said, Jeremiah 17:9 says we can't know our heart. It's so deceitful we can't know it. Well, if you still have that old 17:9 heart, that's true. But right here it tells us that Jesus said, I'll give you a new heart. A heart that'll know me as Lord. And there again, the implication is that old heart, no way it can know God as Lord. And so we'll see that Jeremiah said, through inspiration of God, that give a new heart. God was speaking to him. And then you go over to Ezekiel. It says the same thing. And 36:26. And I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my spirit within you. God's spirit wasn't going to go into that old heart, that Jeremiah 17:9 heart. I mean, if you still got that heart, then you don't have the Spirit of God, because he's not going to come into that heart. And that's the reason we need the heart transplant also, is to make a home for Jesus Christ. That old Jeremiah 17:9 heart wasn't fit to be a home for the Holy Spirit. So we need a heart replacement. And so we're told that old hard-hearted heart would be replaced and would have a compassionate, soft, compassionate heart. Is what it's talking about. And so we see here that that's the reason. If Nicodemus had been familiar with these scriptures, that's a perfect picture of being born again, becoming a new creation, a new heart. And so Nicodemus didn't understand that, but he should have. And boy, people should understand this today. But I had so much opposition to this. Some of it was more subtle. Some of it was just outright told me I didn't know what I was talking about. As I was doing it, I don't know where we got off on that at. But like I say, I heard that for 30 years, what that young man said about, and they were applying this old Jeremiah 17:9 heart to Christians. I want to tell you, that's don't describe my heart. I'm not perfect. And I think that was part of the problem, that people were afraid I was teaching some kind of sinless perfection. No. If you go to Romans chapter 7, it gives a lot of the conflict that Paul had. And it talks about the inner man. And if you study that out, it's talking about the heart. And so nowhere does Paul blame his inner man or his heart. That's all good. And he said, Paul made the statement that I know. Well, how could he know if he had the Jeremiah 17:9 heart? He couldn't. So he had to have a new heart. But because now he can say, I know my heart. And he knows my heart's desire. So then he struggles, though. Well, that's because that we live in a body and with flesh, and this body's not been redeemed yet. Search it out. Our body is still awaiting redemption, but our soul, our heart, has been redeemed already, and God has put His seal upon it. And so I've like I say, some of the responses have been crazy. I even asked a professor of theology one day. He was holding revival at our church, and I asked him about it, and he kind of tried to brush me off a little bit, but he said, well, no, he was one of them, told me I didn't know what I was talking about, basically, but he did it in a nice way. But he said, and here's his answer. I don't know where this comes from, but he said, well, actually, we have several hearts. But we, the saying was that we still have that Jeremiah 17:9 heart. Sorry, no, it's gone. God took it away when he saved us, and he put that new heart in. He took that old one out. And then I talked to another fella, an evangelist, pretty well-known evangelist, and he kind of got on my case because as I was looking and doing some research and studying this out, I researched to see what, the Greek meaning of the word that was translated desperately wicked, just what it, meant. And that's where I said, if you go to an Amplified Bible, it'll give you a lot of these terms. And I honestly think they all apply to it. I don't think you have to pick one or the other. It's wicked, desperately wicked. It's desperately sick. It's incurable. It's all of those things. And so it's worse than what a lot of these people think it was. It was just useless. And nothing about it could be redeemed in that sense. God said, I'll take the old one out and I'll give you a new one. And that's what he did. And so I hope that's what's happened in your life. If it hasn't, then call upon him today. He's waiting with open arms to receive you. And he wants to give you a new heart. He wants to turn you around. And by the way, right quick, if you're one of these people, or if you know those people who say and make excuses for their sin by saying, well, this is the way God made me, and so basically they're blaming God for the way they are. No, they inherited that Jeremiah 17:9 heart that's desperately wicked. Now, they would be without excuse except that Jesus Christ has the remedy. And if they reject the remedy, or if you reject that remedy, then you're without excuse. God has promised that he'd take that old heart out and he'll change it and give us a new one. And we'll be born again into his family. And if you don't want that, then you're not going to have a leg to stand on when you stand in the judgment. Because he has the remedy, and you say no to it. Devil Little Rescue American Ministries.